Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes, and of course you've probably been to my website bluebearflutes.com, as well as our Instagram page, which is also Blue Bear Flutes. Coincidentally, we do have a presence on several other social media. Some of them are becoming more prevalent, like TikTok, for example. I like to put out some videos on there occasionally. This is our 12-week Native American flute playing course, which is designed for the beginner to intermediate level. Whether you're the first time player or a little more advanced and been playing for a while, you should find some use in our videos. This is week number 9, which is a video specific to wetting out and flute care. If you're not familiar with what wetting out is, that's when you've been playing your flute for hours on end and you notice there's some water that is coming out of the mouthpiece. It's condensation that's built up into the sound hole, and you blow and it makes a kind of a gurgly sound. Yeah, that's my impression of a gurgly sound. Anyway, this video is designed to help you figure out what to do about that, and I'll tell you some things that a lot of people have been doing and ways that we combat it here as a flute maker and a flute production company. And we'll also talk about some tips and techniques. As we do with each and every beginning lesson of playing the Native American flute, whether it's these lessons or other one-on-ones or advanced flute lessons that I've given, the first thing that we really need to do is practice what it takes to actually play the flute. And a lot of people don't think about what it takes to play the flute, but air is part of it. If you've noticed, I can talk for a long time and you can't even hear me take a breath. It's because I've had a lot of practice talking in public, and I've also used that technique with playing the flute. And we'll also discuss that. We'll have some other techniques we'll be talking about here in a moment as well. But firstly, if I can suggest, whatever type of Native American flute that you have, even if it's a kinna that you have to blow across the hole like that, you can still use these techniques. Of course, kinnas don't typically wet out the same as a flute like this with a block and a mouthpiece and a sound hole down here. But you'll find some use in our other techniques and our breathing styles, as well as this intro technique that we do every single video. So the first thing you want to do is take a look at your flute. 2, 4, 5, 6 holes, however many fingerings it has. We discussed in our last video also, as I usually try to point out, if you have one of those 6-hole flutes that has a fingering right here and you've been told by the flute maker or whatever pamphlet from the flute company that you got it from tells you to keep that fingering covered up to play the minor scale, that you'll advance to playing that fingering, or you'll learn how to play it, or you'll find somewhere to put it, or whatever other things that they've told you. Keep that fingering covered. I recommend putting something over it if you can. A lot of those companies offer a piece of leather tie, which does make you ask the question, why would I have a hole there and keep it covered up most of the time? Native American flutes historically weren't like that. I have videos about that on our YouTube channel here. But keep that covered up. Everything that you're going to learn with me, you won't have any need for that fingering. In my opinion, and through my videos, you'll find that I believe that fingering is out of place. And you can explore and find out why, but like, just pretend that your flute is a 5-hole flute, which is, of course, what it really is. Anyway, hold this. Sit up as straight as you possibly can. Standing is excellent if you want to stand up while you play, because it helps you keep your posture correct, which makes you develop your airflow into your lungs and your alveoli, and you'll be able to talk as long as I do one day. Deep breath, all holes uncovered. Played the scale a little differently that time, which we've discussed in some of our previous lessons about playing the 3 basic tonguing or pronunciation techniques that you can do to enunciate the notes through your flute. Some notes I started with the D sound or the T sound, as they say, usually in like beginning flute or other musical instrument playing courses. But it's basically how I start the note or how I stop the note, or if I don't try to start and stop the note and just play through. So I didn't articulate any other notes except for the first one, and that's because of habit. But that's just blowing through the flute and uncovering the fingerings. And then a lot of musical classes will teach you that's using the da sound or the D sound. Really what I'm doing is I'm starting the note, but I'm not stopping the note. So I start it and I play straight through until it's time to start the next note. And then the next technique, and I started the note and stopped the note. And when I started and stopped the note, I maintained the length at a certain length. That's kind of neither here nor there, but that's part of a technique that we've discussed. So if you haven't seen my other 12-week course classes yet, this one being class number 9, go back and rewatch them. I think you'll probably find some use in each of them. But then the way that I first played the flute when we started out, is using each of those techniques in a way that it makes it a little more melodic, and that's really what you're shooting for. Don't forget, in addition to these classes on how to play the Native American flute and these excellent basic techniques that I've used myself over the years, I do have countless other videos on our YouTube channel on playing and making Native American flutes. You can look at our playlist specifically for playing if you're not interested in seeing how flutes are made or seeing some of the amazing ones that we've put out. But you can look at the playlist we have on quick tips, might help you learn a few basic techniques that we of course didn't discuss in these flute classes. It's a very comprehensive flute class and very inclusive. However, you can only do so much in so much time, and I do have these structured in a way that we try to cover everything that you need from start to finish to become a great flute player. So that having been said, getting straight to what we're going to do here, normally I like to give you some techniques here or there in the lesson. This one we're going to put the techniques primarily at the end. There's just a couple we're going to go over because I'm going to share a little something interesting with you. When I play the flute, and especially when I've made flutes, oh my gosh, been making them for at this point around 35 years, I akin everything that I do playing and making to world events and world happenings. And I'm not here to talk about any kind of politics or anything. Honestly, I'm not interested in that kind of thing. But what I am interested in is how I can attribute the things that I've learned from the flute to my daily life and how I can use them there to help me, and vice versa. So if you've got daily life experiences, say for example, if you're a sailor, you probably know about things getting wet, and wetting out is one of those majorly important things. I've got friends that play their flutes on boats, and when you're out at sea, coincidentally, there's a lot of water around, so the humidity really gets to them, and they've learned some great things as well. So we'll talk about those, especially in the flute care portion of this. So to start with, wetting out is when the moisture from your breath goes through the flute and it builds up specifically in the track. A lot of flute players that aren't flute makers believe it builds up in this air supply chamber, and it does, of course it does, but not as much as it does, I guess, by percentage of square inch percentage in the track. In the track, your flute can become 50 or 65% saturated with moisture, whereas this chamber here, if it was 65% saturated with moisture, you wouldn't be able to play it. It'd be spitting water out the front the whole time, and that's not going to happen. It's not a pretty image, don't mind mind my image, but it's not going to happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't play. So there's just some simple logic there. I'll say it slowly in case some of you weren't following me. If the air supply chamber was 35% full of water, 30% for example, that's 1/3 of the air supply chamber. If it was 1/3 full of liquid water and the flute was playing like this, even without blowing through it, the water would be pouring out. That having been said, any of you that have had your flute wet out, and other flute makers' flutes tend to wet out more than mine. I'm not bragging. It's things that I've shared with people, and for whatever reason, they still don't do them. But if you have another flute and it tends to wet out, you'll notice that the air coming out of the little track area there, which we did discuss in the parts of the flute, which was week 1, you'll notice that the moisture is actually coming out of it, and you can see it. A lot of times you'll see it coming and spraying out of here. Just looking at it, you'll see the tracks and pathways of it having sprayed out there. So if there was 10% of this area in this air supply chamber, no matter how long your air supply chamber is, if there was 10% of it full of water and you turned it this way, that water would be pouring out. And typically it is water. I mean, a lot of people think it's spit, but it's mostly water. It's water that's been through your body. And using that kind of, example, I'm going to tell you how it gets there. So right now, where I'm at and what time it is of year, it's a little chilly and there's a lot of humidity in the air. When you breathe in your nose, just like an air conditioning system that leaks water out the outside part of the air flow, when you breathe in your nose, that cool, moist air comes in, goes down into your warm body, and it kind of condenses a little bit, and it actually comes out. It seems like it comes out more than what actually goes in, because you don't see water vapor floating around, but when you go outside and you're warm and it's cool outside, you can blow and you'll see the steam come out of your mouth. So that's a process that we go through as a living organism on this planet, and it's part of what wets your flute out. It's actually the biggest part. If you take a drink of something, if you've been drinking a lot of liquid and this liquid has been staying in your mouth, we all do different things in our body, how we produce and how we process things. But if you've been drinking a lot of liquid, then that will also cause you to have more liquid in your breath. Likewise, if you've eaten something, eating triggers your salivary reaction. There may be somewhere around 0.1% of humanity that doesn't do that. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised though, and there's probably a symptom for it or example or a name or something. Anyway, most of us, when we eat something, it triggers a salivary reaction. If you didn't know it, if you put anything in your mouth, it triggers a salivary reaction. Baby pacifiers trigger the salivary reaction. Drinking straws trigger it. Flutes that have a pointy mouthpiece. Many of you have asked me over the years, how do I fit my mouth around this entire flute? We've talked about that also in a couple of our videos, and I mentioned this video in those videos for the 12-week flute playing course. If you have one of those type of flutes that the mouthpiece is very pointy or it has a nub on the end of it, and you put that mouthpiece in your mouth, it will trigger the salivary reaction. I can tell this specifically by playing the types of flutes that we make and the types of flutes that we play here at Blue Bear Flutes. I can tell because I've seen over the years, I've done repairs for people, I've seen hundreds of flutes that have that pointy mouthpiece on them, which is a traditional type, so I'm not trying to debunk that. People did historically make flutes like that and like this. I'm just telling you which one works best for wetting out and which one doesn't. The pointy mouthpiece I've always seen, especially from those companies that make lacquered flutes, and even individuals that make these lacquered flutes that have the mouthpiece pointy at the same time. People that are playing the flute tend to stick it in their mouth, and of course the saliva around and inside of their mouth causes the lacquer to just erode, and eventually you don't know where that's going, but it's going inside of you. The pointy part of the flute starts to erode as well. It looks like somebody's been it looks like without the teeth marks, it looks like they've been eating it. The reason that I make the flutes the way that we have them here and here is that you don't put the entire flute in your mouth. Matter of fact, you don't put any of it in your mouth. You only put it up to your lips. That's all you need to play. You don't need to, encompass that mouth into your oral cavity. You just need to put it up. As long as you can make a face with your lips, you can play the flute without putting it in your mouth. And that will help you stop wetting out enormously. When and where you play, as I just mentioned, will help you stop wetting the flute out. Not drinking too much. A little water is a great idea, but not anything else. Nothing with sugar, nothing with something that your mouth is going to have a reaction to, that it thinks, hey, I need to dissolve this so that it can go down. Water typically doesn't cause that as much as things that are sweet, or like food, for example. You don't want to be eating food and it can only go out, so, but having that food in your mouth, the small particles in there, your mouth is still trying to find a way to put them where they belong, and that salivary reaction is part of it. So now that you know how it's caused, and maybe know a little more than you want to, I'm going to show you what it takes to get rid of it. There are some quick ways to get rid of it that I'll show you in just a moment, but the first thing you want to do is know how to untie your flute block. We talked about that earlier in week 1 class, but you need to know how to do that if you haven't watched that video. You can wipe this off with a tissue. It needs to be something that is preferably lint-free and incredibly dry. A lot of wood, even if it has been sanded super fine after time of holding it, playing it, bumping it around, moisture blowing through, which causes erosion, it will be a little rougher here. So use something that doesn't have fibers that are going to get hung up on that. That's very important, especially when it comes to this piece. So take this, whatever cloth you have, just kind of dry it out. Mine wasn't even wet. I haven't been playing it long, but there again too, you'll note that mine's black right there. The edge of here isn't really as important as the inside. And the reason we make that black in there is we actually burn it. Charred wood does not absorb or slow down the movement of water as much as open wood. If you seal the wood, over time, water will erode the seal. Now, to some minor degree, it will also erode the char, but there are parts of that it doesn't. And most importantly, it actually caramelizes, just like making caramel in a pan. It caramelizes the wood to some degree, and the sugars tend to seize up and they don't really go anywhere. As a matter of fact, some of those sugars, and I'm not sure which ones they are, they're an alcohol-based sugar that's in wood, like an ester, but not, it's a pre-ester. When you heat it up, some of those sugars actually repel water, which is great. And the more they get eroded or something tries to erode them, the more buff they get. So over time, I read a comment on one of my videos today from one of our YouTube subscribers that said that they've had a flute for X amount of years and that it's only gotten sweeter sounding over time. And it's true, it's what happens. So that can happen. But you just want to basically get all that water out of the visible area. And two, if you see that there's a lot of water or that it seems like there's some coming out when you shake it, certainly shaking it's a good idea. But you can put your finger over this air supply hole, not the sound hole. Air supply hole is the first one. Blow through it, and it'll blow a lot of it out. Now, I do have other videos that talk about wetting out, what things you can do. They're a little more specific and even give some alternate solutions that you may have thought of. There are companies out there that sell flutes that have water dispelling, chemically enhanced, scientifically created resin type plastics in there. And I'm not into that. Maybe that's your boat. If that boat holds water, then you're welcome to float in it. But for me, I like to keep things natural. I like to make them as traditional as possible, as keeping up with some level of historical value. And I don't like to use really crazy unnatural materials. So I'm not really into that. Plus, I've actually had one of those flutes in hand before. I was doing a repair on for someone, and I noticed that it seemed to have wetted out more than my flutes do. But there again, like I say, my technique of preventing that from happening is something I've shared over the years, and if flute makers don't want to go that way, it's absolutely up to them. A lot of people think that the more scientifically advanced something is, the better off it is, and that's going to make it perfect. But whatever you think. I should start by, when you tie your flute block back on, set it up there. Our flutes typically have a stop back here. Our drones don't, but the regular flutes do, so you can just slide it in there and put it right up. If you don't have a stop, or if you have a piece of brass and something else you got to fumble with underneath of it, just make sure that the air supply hole is completely open. excuse me, the sound hole is completely open and the air supply hole is completely open. The track piece that you have, that little piece of brass or plastic or wood or cardboard or whatever you've got going on, needs to sit right there so that you have an opening on both ends completely open. The edge of this block that faces down the flute needs to sit right at the back edge of the sound hole. That extra piece of material in there, I've actually had some flute making videos that we discuss that piece of brass at a lot of flute makers, and some of them are great flute making companies. I'm not putting them down, but that piece of brass is just, it was an idea that was not a Native American idea. I mean, if it was Native American, it was as Native American as potato or French fries that were invented by a Native American back in like the 20s or something. But it was not a historical Native American piece of machinery. It wasn't the way things were made. My way may be a derivation of ways that things were made, but it's one that works really well, and it also prevents you from having to fumble around with that piece of brass and getting it straight and making sure it's on there, make sure you didn't lose it in your flute bag or down the road somewhere, and countless other reasons why I've discussed in other videos, and I don't like those. So I don't recommend putting this in your mouth, but you can if you have to, as long as it's clean. That's how I do it. Even if it's leather, this one here has one of our cords that we use on it. I've grown to like these cords quite a bit. I do prefer the leather myself, but a lot of people prefer options that don't include animal skins for some reason, even though historically flutes, I mean, I don't have to say any further, but I respect that. And it's tied back on, and you always want to test it immediately after you tie it back on. There is a shortcut to this, actually, and you can try this and see if it works for you. It may give you some time, and this shortcut, I'm going to tell you where I learned it in just a moment. It's real simple. Put your finger over the sound hole with the block and everything on it. Put your finger over it so it does not make a sound, and blow kind of hard. And if you do that, a lot of the air is going to force the moisture out. This works kind of good in my experience. It's a technique I learned from attending like our sweat lodge and playing my flute in there. And the sweat lodge that I went to first and played a flute in, I noticed that immediately it's because there's so much moisture. If you're not familiar with what a sweat lodge is or a nipi ceremony, you know, you can find out. But the sweat lodge, there's a lot of moisture in there. I mean, it's incredible. Like the barometer just goes off the scale, right? So you could, if you could see in there, you could see the moisture in the air. And if you get the rocks glowing enough, sometimes you'll see the moisture. It's everywhere. And it's going in your nose and your lungs and everything. It's part of the whole experience, I should say. And it comes out into the flute a lot. Not to mention, but the moisture that's already in the flute, because you're in a very moist area, is a lot more than normal as well. So you can play in there. And, well, I say you can play in there. I'm not recommending that you necessarily attend one of these ceremonies or go into one of these sweat lodges, but if you did, you could take a flute in there and play if the sweat lodge leader allowed that. But when I have in the past, I found that keeping my flute's sound hole covered, I don't worry about this part so much. That's actually kind of a good thing. And I keep the mouthpiece covered a little bit until it's time to play, and then I'll play. And if they ask me to play again, I'll make sure I blow it out kind of slowly and over a long period of time. It's the same as blowing really fast all at once, to try to force some of that air out. And I'll just keep this covered like this. If you just cover part of it, it actually kind of like the way you can hold water in a drinking straw with one finger, and then you let your finger off and the water will come out. If you just hold your hand over the mouthpiece, it'll keep a lot of it from getting back up inside of there. Moisture inside of here is actually not such a bad thing immediately. Over time, it can become a real problem, but immediately, no. And in addition, flute care, that's something that we really should talk about. With flute care, it depends on how your flute is made. The flute could be lacquered, as I mentioned. It could be lacquered outside and inside. There's people that do that. I don't do that. I don't lacquer flutes. And it could be oiled with some special kind of oil. Typically, Most oils have a similarity that if you use one kind of oil and then go back over it with another kind of oil, it shouldn't hurt it too much. It may dull the finish just a pinch, but over time, it's gonna finish it off pretty nicely. Oil is what I like to do for flute care. It really is. If your flute hasn't been lacquered, you see this one's actually got kind of a nice patina on it, a nice little shine, even though it's been banged around in a flute bag with a bunch of other flutes and been all over the place. And you can see there's some discoloration right here, which happens on all my flutes over the years. But a little bit of oil would really help this thing, especially right now. If you take something about the size of a teaspoon full of, say, olive oil, for example. I've used mineral oil or baby oil over the years. Today we use a very safe oil that is incredible. It's amazing. We'll discuss in other videos and have discussed in other videos. But if you'll pour just a little bit, say olive oil, down in here, about a teaspoon is a lot. For just about any given size flute, you'll know what to look for in just a moment to figure out how much you need. But about a teaspoon as an example, and then look down in there and kind of roll it around. Now, I don't like it to come out the sound hole or to drip into the track. It's okay if it does, but I don't like to do that. It saves me time not to. So I look at it and I can see down in there and see all these imperfections and everything, which are really not really a big deal. The flute's a flute. And then I roll it back this way. And then when it mostly gets up here in the top, I like to turn it this way and let it run back down. And usually I try to make it run in a different place. So that's usually when I hold it with the fingerings facing at an angle down so that the oil can run down the fingering area. Now, if you have a lacquered flute and you don't know if it's been oil-based lacquered or water-based lacquered, oil will remove lacquer from either, but it does remove water-based lacquer, which is what most people usually use, more than it does on oil-based lacquer, which is less commonly used. Oil-based lacquer, a common one that's used today is like Rust-Oleum. Putting that oil inside of it, as long as it's not been lacquered on the inside, should actually improve the sound probably 50 to 100%, no matter whose flute it is. If you don't have a lacquer on your flute, or the flute maker suggests that they use oil, you can also take a rag of some sorts and wipe that oil on the outside of the flute, which will also help preserve it. This is a Native American historical system of preserving wood and leather and so many other bone and so many other things. But oiling the flute is a technique that most indigenous peoples of the earth have used in some form, but Native people definitely have. I know that us Cherokee Indians are very proud of our bear fat that we use. Bear fat to most people smells like, oh gosh, I couldn't describe it in good confidence because I love it myself. But, you know, I attract to the smell of it. But a lot of people are like, oh, what is that? Bears don't really smell great typically to most people. But bear fat is something we use a lot. Historically, we've used it a lot. I don't use it on my flutes simply because I like to keep them to where, you know, anybody is interested in them and not just a few of us. But that was something that was used. And then also, so many other animals that have fat on their bodies that natives have either eaten regularly or have good access to. Dog oil, not a real uncommon thing or not unheard of thing. Any other animals though, as a matter of fact, some of us save deer fat a lot. If you have ever had deer meat before and it was you had some leftovers and you put them in the fridge and you look in the fridge the next day, usually there's a beautiful yellow fat on top of it. And I'm not telling you to rub that in your hair, on your skin, or in your flutes, but I am telling you that it has been done. So that's a good option. And then from there, you know, it's not always necessary to wipe your flute out. If you just let it sit somewhere, keep in mind you have oil which stains cloth and clothing. Sit it somewhere that it's going to drain and soak into the wood and not cause stain. That's a good idea. You may not want to mix it with other flutes if you have flutes that are lacquered and that kind of thing. So that's basic flute care. Usually we don't get anything in here. I do like to use myself. It's up to you if you use it. I like to put about 3 drops of a pure essential peppermint oil in my flute. My wife and so many other people have commented on how wonderful it smells when I play the flute. And if you have a oil vaporizer, you'll know that this is basically doing the same thing. It's pushing that oil vapor out. But peppermint oil is supposed to keep pests away, like spiders, which look for holes to build into, and also other bugs, any kind of other pests. It'll keep them away. It really does dispel them. Plus, I like the smell of it. I don't actually taste it because I usually drip it down in there and then I wipe it off really good so I don't have any on there, because pure essential oils may cause a reaction with your mouth or what have you. So read up on that before you decide to use it. But I like to pour it down in there and then let it play. Like I say, getting things like peppermint oil, for example, if you're not aware, can actually burn your skin. It doesn't burn everybody's skin, and it takes a certain amount for different people, so keep that in mind. But like I say, I like to put it in there, and it really makes a difference in my flutes. You may find another solution, and certainly I always like hearing about people's other techniques of doing these kind of things. So getting to our couple of flute techniques here, and finishing up today's class on wedding out and flute care, I would like to mention to you the first thing that was like the most important thing. I had mentioned to you a moment ago about how I think and how I play the flute and how it relates to everything else. This may help you in life, and I don't always start out a conversation by telling you that, although in my life I hear that this may help you out in life. I hear that every time I listen to people, every time I see something, anything, and I use it as an inspiration. A lot of the most successful people in the world have a technique that many of you may not have heard of. And I share this technique openly with my friends, my attendants to our classes, our enemies, if I have any, anybody. I share this with you because it, I think, will make us all better people. But the most successful people in the world have a technique of looking at everything, especially what others consider to be problems, as an opportunity. And that opportunity could mean a lot of things. I've been considering lately, and I'll just share this real quick thing with you, most of you don't know. 7 years ago, I was in a car accident with my wife, just the two of us. I was actually writing my how to make the Native American flute making book at that time. 7 years ago, I was in that car accident, and ever since then, my back has hurt worse and worse over the years. And I keep thinking to myself, isn't there something about bones and how they grow and how they repair themselves and whatever? And I think it's over every 5 to 7 years, your bones have regenerated completely. Now, there's a lot more to just bones and backs, and gosh, I've seen doctors and chiropractors and everything. My chiropractor's a really great guy. Dr. Weeks, thank you. Anyway, he has helped me a lot with my back over the years and helped me do some things, and a lot of exercises help me. So I don't know if you can see this, but I've mentioned all the great things that I've done to help my back after having been in this car accident. And today I was thinking to myself, as I was walking, feeding my farm animals, that I may have reached that 7-year period, because my back actually feels a lot better. I even told my wife today's probably the best my back has felt in years. And I try to remember my posture when I say that, because that's one of those things that I've learned in these last 7 years since that car accident. So anything that you do, a mistake, an accident, a problem, something that you feel like has left you without something or has really slowed you down, you can make that into an opportunity. Most everybody that I've known, I've seen, I've met that have what a lot of us consider to be debilitating, things in their life, a lot of those people see it that same way too, which to me makes them very successful. But people in the world that most of you consider important because of how much money they've made or because of their notoriety or what have you, those people also use the same technique. It's a great technique. My friend from forever ago, one of my coworkers, told me, if you have any problems when you come into work tomorrow, leave them at the door. Just don't think about them when you come in here to work, because they'll be waiting for you when you get back off of work and you go out the door. You can pick them up and take them with you and fret about them for the rest of the day. And that has really left me I mean, it leaves me speechless, but it's something that has helped me out a lot in life. And I recommend that. If you think about it, you don't have to pick those problems up when you go back out the door. Um, like I said, using the other technique I mentioned and I know this doesn't sound like a flute playing lesson, but it actually is. And that's, I mentioned to you how I learned about posture and how I learned about waiting out from being in the sweat lodge. That was a problem, but it taught me a lot. And these things, like I say, I attribute everything in my life to how I've learned something from here and I apply it over there. Everything from languages to flute making to farming to whatever, relationships, whatever it takes, there's a way that you can attribute it and you can understand something of it. And that will lead me into, as I mentioned, this first technique I'd like to tell you about. It's a slow volume raise or crescendo. I know all you musicians out there are saying that's crescendo. A slow volume raise and a slow volume lower. So that technique will actually start your audience to listening to you, or it'll start you to being interested in what you're doing. You don't want to always start off just blaring out as hard as you can to the flute really quickly. So you can see how much more interesting it is. And you don't have to go low, high, low, high. You don't have to go small volume, more volume. And there doesn't always have to be an in-between. You can cut straight from low to high. But that makes your flute playing interesting to others. If you start off softly and not too abruptly, it gives it a chance to sink in to your listener, to your audience, before you really get into what you're doing. And this technique is something I use regularly. I usually do it without thinking about it. That's why I made sure I made a note about it to tell you, because a lot of these things I do and other flute players have been playing for years do it second nature. But that raising the volume and lowering the volume, if you use a technique we talked about on the last lesson about what you're going to play next, you can think about raising the volume, lowering the volume next as well. So I know it's getting more complicated, but it's really not. The more you practice, the more you play those scales, the easier all this stuff becomes, and it becomes second nature for you as well. Another thing is an articulate transition. Okay, so transitions will help you to define your phrase or your part of the song that you're playing next or now or before. The transitions are how you go in from one thing to the next. What we just talked about the slow raise and lower, is a transition from not playing to stop playing. So transitions can happen anywhere in the flute music. And I played it, if you want to go back and listen, I played transitions in that tiny little phrase. It lasted about all of maybe 15, 20 seconds. I transitioned in there a bunch of times. Transitions So what I did just then was I played a little fast and I played the same piece twice, but I knew I wanted to change it to something else. And I know this sounds really complex. It's not. Go back and listen to this a couple times. But when I changed to the simpler thing, I actually slowed down, reduced my volume, and I played a long note. And then I played a slow piece. And as I was getting out of that slow piece, I could have played on for an hour more and kept doing something similar or something different or whatever. As I get out of that slow piece, I actually played some of the notes, not in the same way, but some of the notes from the previous phrase. This is how you tie transitions in together that keeps your audience very interested in what you're doing. I know that that's really a basic songwriter's technique or musician's technique, especially for musicians that play improv. A jazz saxophonist has so many of these techniques in their pocket, waiting to pull them out on a moment's notice. And that transition from a more articulate sound to a less articulate one, that kind of stuff's really important and gives you a lot to think about. Anyway, I hope that this video has found you well. I hope you've been practicing. I know you've had a little bit of time since the last video to practice that we released. However, we'll make sure that you have far less practice time until the next one. And certainly I look forward to hearing from you all, as I usually do. Please make sure you check out our other videos. We have lots of those. Now that we're making videos on TikTok, as long as that platform's still up and running, and probably a couple of other platforms I'll be mentioning soon, you'll have some other things you can go and listen to. And that's what helped me in the beginning, was listening to other flute players. Today, honestly, I don't enjoy listening to other Native American flute players as much as I did, but it's probably because I make hundreds of thousands. My family and I, my wife makes more flutes than I do. My family and I make so many flutes that I hear them on a daily basis, and I actually have to sit down and relax for 5 minutes before I can listen to flute music. I do enjoy playing a lot, and I don't get to play as much as I used to. Going to be changing here really soon, as you will notice in upcoming videos. But the experience of this instrument has changed my life, and I hope that it has changed all of yours. And if it hasn't yet, you're wondering when that moment is going to come, you're almost there. You really are. As a matter of fact, it may have happened and you just didn't notice it yet. So anyway, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for Blue Bear Flutes and bluebearflutes.com. Please make sure you check out our other flute playing videos on this 12-week course, as well as all the videos yet to come. Y'all take care and happy flute playing.